Hi, and welcome to the X22 Report. My name is Dave, and this is episode 267, and today's date is January 18th, 2014, and the title of this episode is the Current Economic Collapse News Brief for this Saturday. And we're going to head out to Spain, and what do we understand in Spain? We understand that their unemployment is hitting all-time new highs. We understand that the Eurozone is in a recession/depression. Most of the countries have very high unemployment. The youth unemployment is skyrocketing, and they're holding a huge amount of debt. And right now, Spain is reporting that delinquencies and defaults in Spain hit an all-time new high of 13%. They haven't seen anything like this, a level of this many delinquencies and defaults since about 50 years ago. So what we see right now is they are having major problems. Italy's having problems, Portugal's having problems, Spain is having problems, Greece, Cyprus, all having major problems. The UK, people are dipping into their savings, trying to make ends meet. People are even getting payday loans to pay their rent and mortgages. And unemployment is rising in every single one of these countries. We saw this back in 1929. Europe was in a recession/depression, and the United States had this illusion going with the stock market that everything was fine, but there was nothing fine in the United States, and that's why it all came tumbling down at the end of the 1920s in 1929 when we had the first crash hit. Now, we understand that China has been purchasing the United States debt, and they haven't been purchasing that much. I know the news came out there and they said, oh, look at this, they're purchasing our debt. And, it was reported back in November, and that was the last time they reported. But we have to look at the Fed, who purchased, 64% or something like that, more debt than China. And right now we understand that China said they don't see it beneficial for them to take on more U.S. dollars or more Treasury bonds. And today they announced that the Chinese government will adjust the amount of U.S. debt it possesses if necessary, but these adjustments won't be subject to apolitical wrangling. So to me, it seems like what they're going to start to do, because they don't see it beneficial for them to hold the U.S. treasuries or the dollar anymore, they're going to start to scale this back and probably not purchase any more of this. And we can see what China is doing right now. They are making deals all across the world to become clearinghouses for the yuan. They're making swap deals with the UK, and they're buying gold like there's no tomorrow. And of course, we understand there is no tomorrow because the collapse is coming. So they understand what is happening with the U.S. dollar. Russia has also said the same thing, that in 2017 they don't even see the dollar being the reserve currency anymore around the world. And we can see just by looking out that the U.S., the central bankers, the private Western central bankers, are having a major problem out there because they are losing control in the Middle East. And we'll talk a little bit about that a little bit later in this report here. But let's go on to Obamacare right now. And what they're finding is that most of the people that are enrolling already had health insurance. And what Obamacare really needs to do is they need to get those people, those young people that don't have health insurance, to sign up, and it's just not happening. And this goes on to say that most of the people who have signed up for Obamacare coverage already had insurance, raising questions about how the healthcare overhaul will reduce the number of uninsured Americans. Just 11% of those buying through the healthcare exchanges were uninsured. And guess what? Those people who don't have health care most likely will not buy health care because it is too expensive. They are doing the bare minimum right now. They're buying food. They're paying their rent. They might be purchasing clothing. And this is all they can afford at this time. And again, if we look at Obamacare, these plans are not cheap. They also have very high deductibles. This entire Obamacare system is going to implode on itself. They will not be able to get this thing going. And we can see already they're having major, major problems. And again, I've said this in the past reports, this is not for the people. Something for the people would be affordable. You wouldn't have penalties. You wouldn't have hidden taxes. And guess what? The Congress and the President wouldn't be exempt from it, because if it's not good for them, it shouldn't be good for the American people. And if it was good for the people, and it was truly for the people, when this started, they should have had every single person in Congress and the president sitting in front of a computer signing up. And this is how you know that the leaders of our country do not believe in this whatsoever, and they don't want it. Now, we've talked a lot in my other reports about gun control and what the government is looking to do, and they are trying to disarm the American people. And we see what they're doing with the veterans, because all the executive orders that Obama came out with mental disorders and PSD and everything like that, and they're trying to disarm the veterans. They're trying to put this into place where people, their medical records can be searched upon to find out if they have a medical disorder, and now they're taking it one step further. In New York, we have a senator out there, Senator Margaret Markey, who's out there who's introducing a Senate Bill A8186-2013. This bill is going to require all public school children in New York, and we have to remember, New York has the strictest gun control laws that were put into place. It was copied from the Dianne Feinstein law that was never passed in the federal government, but of course New York has it. And right now, of course, Mayor Bloomberg, who was the mayor, had the mayors against guns, but this will require all public school children in New York to have 2 health examinations in elementary grades and 2 in secondary grades. These exams must include a psychological evaluation, which certifies that the child is mentally fit to permit attendance at a public school. If they are not medically fit, psychologically, they get no certificate and they cannot attend. And this goes into the student's record. Now, as they get older, what happens? What happens when they're older and this is in their record? Well, I'm going to tell you. They will not be able to get a weapon. Even if they aren't mentally ill and the psychologist says, oh, seems a little strange or this, it will still be in their record and they're going to use this going forward. And we can see their approach. And my children who went to school, who are still going to school, had to attend this assembly called Project Century, where they talked about how bad guns are. They didn't bring up the Second Amendment. They didn't do anything like that. Now, they had to get permission from every single parent for your child to attend, but what came out of this is that they sat there and they drilled it into the child's head that guns are bad, guns are bad, guns are bad, and they're only used for killing, and that is it. And we can see where they are moving with this because they want to disarm the American people. And we are definitely going to see, and we've been seeing this, there's been quite a bit of number of shootings going on, and this is building up to the next mass shooting. And how will we know that the next mass shooting will be the one that they're going to try to push the UN Arms Treaty, which is pending in the Senate, and the Dianne Feinstein gun control bill, which is pending in the Senate? As soon as this mass shooting goes down, it will be horrific, it will be bloody, and the president will come out right away talking about gun control. This is how we'll know that this is the false flag for getting these bills passed. Okay. Now, I talked a lot about all the military assets being moved all around the world and them getting ready for World War III. Now, China right now is building its own aircraft carrier. This will be the first aircraft carrier built entirely by China, and it is being constructed right now. And once it's constructed, they're going to build 3 more so they can have a total of 4 aircraft carriers. The one they have out there now was built by China, but it was taken from an old hull from Russia, and they built on top of that. But this aircraft carrier is from scratch, and then the rest will be copied from this one, and they are definitely building up their fleet because there is a pivot to Asia, and we understand what is happening. I said in yesterday's report that 60% of the nuclear submarines are in the Pacific, and I think out of the 10 ships, aircraft carriers, we have 6 already in the Pacific right now. Now, we understand that the private Western central bankers, the U.S. government, they are losing control in the Middle East, and I've discussed this many, many times, that when they lose control and they are not able to keep the puppet regimes in Africa, in the Middle Eastern states, and the rebels, the people who want the central bankers and the U.S. government out of these countries, they will no longer sell the natural resources using the U.S. dollar, and those dollars will come flooding back to the United States because, again, if you're not selling the resources using the U.S. dollar, no other country needs it, and what happens? They get rid of them. So right now, since we have this problem, the central bankers, the U.S. government, have this problem, U.S. intel presses for expanded satellite surveillance of al-Qaeda in North Africa because we understand there are forces in Central Africa, we understand there are forces in Mali, we understand there are forces in Sudan, and they're trying to protect the natural resources of every single one of these countries, and they need to keep the central western banks in these countries with the puppet regime because they need to keep this all going. And the officials said a key goal was to track the movement of al-Qaeda organizations throughout Africa. And again, the central bankers, U.S. government, calls al-Qaeda those rebels, those people who are fighting to push the central bankers and the U.S. government out of the country. They use al-Qaeda in many different ways, and this way, and the American people think like, oh my God, there's terrorists running around all of these countries. No. Libya, Lebanon, Iraq, Yemen, Sudan, Central Africa, Mali, everyone that they're talking about, al-Qaeda, are the rebels, are the people of that country trying to push the central bankers and the U.S. government out of their countries because they want these countries back. It is almost like Iran, what Iran did in 1979. They pushed the central bankers and the U.S. government out of their country. These countries are doing this right now, and they call them al-Qaeda. Now, of course, the U.S. government also fights along al-Qaeda, which, like in Syria, they're fighting along al-Qaeda and the rebels to overthrow Assad, because we have to remember, and I've said this many times before, but those people who are new to this, who've listening to me for the first time, a country that does not have a private Western central bank is the enemy of the central bankers. North Korea, China, Russia, Syria, Iran, all these countries are the enemy. Now, in Syria, Assad is the enemy, and they use al-Qaeda and the rebels to fight against Assad. In the other countries that the central bankers and the U.S. government already invaded, already have a puppet regime in Libya, Lebanon, Yemen, Iraq. So the al-Qaeda are the people who are trying to fight and get their country back. So this is how they designate al-Qaeda out in Africa and the Middle East. Now, there is a German lawmaker who says the Iran sanctions affected Western countries' economy more so than Iran. This goes on to say a senior German lawmaker from the Christian Democratic Party says Western sanctions against Iran have affected the economies of the sanctioning countries. That the sanctions were not only causing problems for Iran, but they also caused problems for those countries that were sanctioning Iran. Now, yesterday in my report, I said that John Kerry, the Obama administration, the goals were exactly the same. They have not changed. The tactics will be changed up to reach their goals. And we see that they changed their tactics to get into Iran. And in Syria, we understand that they want to overthrow Assad, and they want to overthrow the government in Iran and wipe that government out, put a puppet regime in there, put in place a central Western central bank, and sell the natural resources using the U.S. dollar. And Kerry said yesterday that they want Assad out, and that's what they want. Now, Russia right now is boosting arm deliveries to Assad's army. Several sources report that since December, transports have been delivering to Syria armored vehicles, surveillance equipment, radars, electronic warfare systems, spare parts for helicopters, and various weapons, including guided bombs for planes. They understand what is going on. They understand the private Western central bankers have no choice at this time because they do not want to be blamed for the collapsing economy. So they're going to push and push and push to prop up the dollar as much as they possibly can until they can get a war going, and the blame is taken off the central bankers. Now, Libya, like I said, in the Middle East, there is huge amounts of problems going on there. Libya just declared a state of emergency. Now, why would they declare a state of emergency? Because the rebels are winning. They are pushing the puppet regimes, the armed forces, further back, and they're taking over the countries. This is why we see Lebanon and Libya and Iraq threatening that if you sell this oil or natural resources not using the US dollar, we're going to blow the tankers out of the sea. And they are having a huge amount of problems, and the central bankers, the US government, realize this. And as things continually get worse and worse, this will push forward the event that is coming, because they need to get boots on the ground. They need to get into these countries and take control again. And the only way to get boots on the ground, and when I say boots on the ground, I mean the U.S. forces, is to have some type of an event here in the United States. And I've said this many times, because they've tried false flags in other areas. It just doesn't work. The people of the United States do not care. They do not want to go to war. Congress does not want to vote for war. So the only way to do it is to show that these countries attacked the U.S., and once this happens and we have some type of event here on American soil, this will push their agenda forward for war. Now, I've talked about the cyber attacks on Target and Neiman Marcus, and it has come out that 6 more stores attacked by same hack as Target, and we understand, I talked about this yesterday, that it has to do with something with Russia, which I really don't think so. I think something else is going on there, and if you want to hear about that, go back to episode 266, and you can hear what I was discussing about the potato trading with Lavrov and John Kerry. Now, Indian intel warns of terror attacks on U.S. sites after diplomatic problems. Now, we understand that a Indian diplomat was detained and searched and stripped down here in the U.S., and the Indian government is really, really angry about this. And the Indian government has sent an official diplomatic note to the U.S. Embassy demanding that the U.S. shut down all social clubs and all commercial activities, including tax-free alcohol, inside its largest embassy compound in New Delhi. This apparently in retaliation against the arrest and alleged rough handling by New York police of the Indian diplomat. And what they're saying right now, the Indian media is reporting that India's intelligence bureau had issued a warning that attacks on U.S. offices in 5 Indian states were more likely now. That 5 states where the U.S. maintains diplomatic and consular offices include New Delhi, Calcutta, Hyderabad, and Mumbai are all going to have some type of terrorist attack, and we're going to see how this plays out. And we can see that tensions are building in every single country. The tensions are building in India, tensions are building in North Korea, tensions are building with Russia, tensions are building with China, tensions are building with Syria. It is happening all over the place because they need the tension to rise, because in order for this war to go forward, they need everyone all angry and pissed off. So when the time comes to declare war, it makes it much easier, and the American people say, oh yeah, look, they were going to strike us, this definitely came from this country, and we can see it all building up right now. Listen, everyone, thanks a lot for listening. Be well, be safe, and especially be prepared. Thanks a lot.